that the consequences of the siege at the Capitol still loom large. This week, the House held a hearing investigating the attack. Several Republicans, including Representative Andrew Clyde of Georgia, downplayed what happened.
There was no insurrection, and to call it an insurrection, in my opinion, is a bold-faced lie. You know, if you didn't know the TV footage was a video from January the 6th, you would actually think it was a normal tourist visit.
Clyde's comments are, of course, clearly false. There was a violent insurrection on January 6th. But in the GOP, accepting reality has consequences. House Republicans booted Representative Liz Cheney from her leadership post for calling out false claims about the election. Ahead of her removal, Cheney took a defiant last stand against the former president.
Millions of Americans have been misled by the former president. They have heard only his words, but not the truth, as he continues to undermine our democratic process, sowing seeds of doubt about whether democracy really works at all. This is not about policy. This is not about partisanship. This is about our duty as Americans. Remaining silent and ignoring the lie emboldens the liar. I will not participate in that.
After being voted out, Cheney doubled down on her stance. I want to go to you, Manu. You didn't get a chance to jump in on the COVID, but I want to talk to you a little bit about Liz Cheney. How is she going to go forward? What's her plan? And does she see herself possibly being in the Oval Office?
You know, that's an open question. I have a hard time seeing how she may have any traction in a Republican primary in 2024. This is a party that is dominated still by the former president, that has such a strong attachment, connection to the Republican base. Now, 4 years, of course, is a long time. We'll see how much the party changes between now and then. But Cheney is decidedly in the minority, not just overall in the party among the base, but also in her own conference. You know, there are really only a handful of Republicans who are in the same position of her about calling out the president and calling out his lies, and which is why she got ultimately pushed out. And one of the big reasons is not just because of this fight, is because that the fight has caused a distraction for Republicans, because this moment she starts questioning the election and starts questioning Donald Trump's saying that the election was stolen or rigged in other ways, then her colleagues are forced to answer questions about what they believe. And what they don't want to say is that the election was legitimate. A lot of them don't, because if they do that, then they get hammered by Donald Trump. So then they suggest that there's some sort of irregularities or anomalies or variances or something amiss in the election without really any evidence to back that up. And that puts them on the opposite side of the facts. And that ultimately is a position that Republican leaders just do not want to be on. So that's one reason why you saw Kevin McCarthy maneuver behind the scenes and engineer her ouster, is that they simply did not want to be confronted with these questions time and again. And one reason why they elevated Elise Stefanik, who won today overwhelmingly, not because of her conservative voting record. She has one of the most moderate voting records among any House Republican, but because she has allied herself with Donald Trump, as she did when she defended him in the 2019 impeachment trial, all the way through his efforts to overturn the elections. And so we're seeing where the House Republican conference lies. It is not with Liz Cheney. It is squarely with Donald Trump.
Well, Kasie, I want to bring you in here. You were asking all the right questions to Liz Cheney just minutes after she was ousted. Talk to me a little bit about that experience and what you're hearing. But also, there is this sort of deal to form this January 6th commission, but Kevin McCarthy is saying he's concerned about the scope. What do we know about what's going on with the commission?
That's right, Yamiche. And in fact, in some ways, there was a lot of surprise this afternoon when there was a bipartisan agreement announced on this commission to investigate what happened on January 6th. And this is something that Liz Cheney has been extraordinarily focused on. And to touch on what you and Manu were just discussing, the question that I had for Cheney was not necessarily what she was going to do to put herself in the Oval Office, but rather how far she was going to be willing to go to keep former President Trump out of office. They are not actually necessarily the same thing. That doesn't mean that her running for president isn't necessarily part of whatever solution she finds. But I do think it's an important distinction. And one of the things that I think has been kind of behind the scenes in this conversation about Cheney and her leadership role is what's going to happen with this January 6th commission. We know that Cheney did an interview with ABC News. It's set to air in full on Sunday, where she said that she expects the minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, potentially to get subpoenaed to testify in the course of that commission investigation. She said certainly they'd want to talk to him. Perhaps he would do it voluntarily. And there are some questions about what transpired when he called the former president, who of course was then in the Oval Office, on January 6th and said to him, please call off your people. They've invaded the Capitol. And of course, McCarthy has really changed how he has approached the narrative of January 6th in the intervening weeks and months. It didn't actually take very long. But that's something that Cheney is very focused on. And I think it's something that clearly many Republicans are nervous about this commission, even though they got some concessions. It's going to be evenly split. And while they'll have subpoena power, Republicans will effectively be able to veto subpoenas if they want to.
Mm-hmm. Related to that, Kevin McCarthy was at the White House, Eugene, and he said no one's questioning the legitimacy of the 2020 election. Of course, we know that that's not true. The former President Trump is doing that every single day. Talk to me a little bit about how the White House deals with Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans as they say things like that.
Yeah, something about this White House that I found really surprising is their ability to squarely focus on the end result, right? Like they put the blinders on and they want to go straight to exactly what they want to do. We saw that with COVID-19. Anytime we tried to ask them about anything else, they weren't willing to get off message. And they're doing the exact same thing now. You saw an interview with President Biden talking about this exact same thing. He was asked by Lawrence O'Donnell, how do you engage with people who don't think that you're a legitimate president? And he said, I believe everyone no one's above redemption, and most importantly, that he has to do this job. And so I think that is actually how they are seeing this. You talk to people behind the scenes at the White House, and they don't engage in kind of, they know that when someone gets in the Oval Office, it's a completely different conversation. There's no cameras, there's no reason to, to peacock and talk about the things that you would talk about if you're on cable news. But at the same time, you have McCarthy sending out an email right after saying that, calling the president names. And so it is going to make it a little bit difficult. And it's hard for this White House, I think, to understand when Republicans are coming in a good faith effort. Mm-hmm. And so they really want to get this bipartisan deal done on infrastructure. How they do that when people don't think that he's the president, he doesn't need that many people to believe that he is to get the job done. But it does make things a lot more difficult.
Mm-hmm. Susan, I want to bring you in here. One thing that also happened this week was that Marjorie Taylor Greene was literally accused of harassing Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. What does that tell you about how tensions are right now? And talk to me a little bit, of course, about Nancy Pelosi and how she's handling all this, her priorities.
I think Pelosi I interviewed her a couple weeks ago. She was pessimistic that this commission, this 9/11 style commission, was ever going to get approved. She had a backup plan to name a select committee, which she could do like the Benghazi committee, but clearly preferred the kind of gravitas and authority that this bigger bipartisan 9/11 style commission would have. I think it's a surprise that they got there. And it's not totally done yet, right? McCarthy hasn't signed off on it. We know it'll get through the House. Regardless, we don't know what will happen necessarily in the Senate, but it looks like it's well on its way. And it's one of several things where I think the White House's ability to focus on the priorities that they have and not the priorities everybody else has are paying off. You see that, get the gas lines. They had to deal with it, but as little as possible. The situation in the Middle East, they had to deal with it, but as little as possible. They are focused on the pandemic, on the economy, maybe on China, and that is it.